Welcome to The Podcast Compels You, the podcast where we are given categories by our cursed AI chatbot, forced to find movies that fit in those categories, and share them with you fine folks. I'm Bill, and with me as always is my co-host Stacy. How you doing, Stacy?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. How are you?
I am also doing great. We had a little bit of technical difficulty earlier, but I think we've fully recovered, hopefully.
That's why the question made me laugh, because I was like, you know damn well how I am.
I was going to play it off like everything was peachy keen, but I think we got our bearings straight, though.
We owe the listener some honesty.
That's true. We're nothing if not honest. I was actually in D.C. over the weekend, and I thought of you because I randomly walked past an Alamo Draft House, which I did not know they had one in D.C., and I was like, didn't get a chance to stop in, unfortunately, but I did see it, and I'm like, I think Stacy would appreciate this, because you see most of your movies there. Would that be accurate?
It would be accurate to say that I see most of my movies there. Do you mind if I give you a few reasons why?
No, that was me my next question, so by all means.
Well, as you know, they kick the assholes out for talking in the movie or having their cell phones out, which is the downfall of society. But in addition to that, I just thought of like some other really good things. They don't play commercials before the movie. That's a big thing. So you can get there like 30 minutes early and like order drinks or food. And instead of commercials, they do like a custom ad-free pre-show for every movie. So it's always relevant to the movie, to the actors, the franchise, whatever it is you're seeing. And it's always like I think it's educational and entertaining. Number 2 is the theaters are clean. The floors are not sticky. There's not popcorn everywhere, which I can't stand. And then number 3, the staff, as far as I know, and I've been going there for a really long time, is treated reasonably well, and they are paid better than other theaters. They get a 64% on Glassdoor, would recommend working there, which is pretty high because it's Glassdoor and people go there to complain. So
absolutely.
Those are just a few reasons I love the Alamo. I'll probably think of some more next time. And Alamo, if you're listening, please consider sponsoring The Podcast Compels You. Now on with the show. So we have a lot to cover with this week's film. So I'm actually going to pass it right back to you, Stacy. What were the cursed categories for this week, and what film will we be discussing tonight? Thank you for asking. The cursed category this week is each movie must feature snow and star a family member of a famous actor. And last time, Bill, you did a lovely preamble to this category in part 1 of this episode, in which we discussed The Lodge. So I will not duplicate that effort at this time, but if you'd like to hear Bill wax rhapsodic about horror set in the snow and Hollywood nepotism, along with our in-depth discussion of The Lodge, please check out part 1 of this episode. This week's movie is The Blackcoat's Daughter, 2015. Written and directed by Osgood Perkins, also known as Oz, son of the late actor Anthony Perkins, who is, of course, best known to our fellow horror nerds everywhere as Norman Bates in the original 1960 Hitchcock horror thriller Psycho. The Blackcoat's Daughter was Oz's directorial debut. He did go on to write and direct Netflix's I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House, 2016.
Oh, I haven't seen that. Is it good?
It's okay. It's fairly like right in the middle, mid-rating. I see it because I love hauntings and ghosts. So I enjoyed some things, other things not. But, it's fair. So but the other thing I'm excited about is the latest thing that he's written and directed is 2024's eagerly anticipated horror thriller Longlegs, starring none other than Nicolas Cage, among other horror credits.
Yes. Say no more. Nicolas Cage, you've got me.
I have to say, I am really looking forward to Longlegs. The trailer makes it look pretty scary, which I hope it is. Have you seen the Longlegs trailer, Bill?
No, is it supernatural or which subgenre would you place it in based on the trailer?
I'm thinking it's paranormal, but
Okay.
I perhaps we don't have enough information to know for sure.
All
But
right.
the trailer itself is a treat, so
Cool. I'm going to check it out after
treat
this.
yourself to that. But back to the Blackcoat's Daughter, which
Yes.
stars the lovely Emma Roberts, who had a sizable role in Scream 4, appeared as several characters over 6 seasons of American Horror Story, and played Mean Girl Chanel in both seasons of Fox's Scream Queens. She checks one box of this episode's cursed category because her aunt is none other than Julia Roberts. Bill, just for funsies, do you happen to know how Julia Roberts feels about horror movies?
Ooh, I'm trying to remember if I've heard this in like an interview. I don't. I'm going to guess she does not like them.
That is such a good guess. She does not like to be scared. She has
Okay.
publicly said she won't even watch the scary movies or shows that her niece Emma is in, such as American Horror Story, even though she's friends with creator Ryan Murphy, who directed that weird Eat, Pray, Love movie. I guess she was in. I don't know. I don't watch
Ryan
those.
Murphy directed that?
Apparently so. Isn't that
Ryan
weird?
Murphy is all over the map. If you look at his like
He so
filmography,
is.
like he did like Nip Tuck back in the day, which is like a great trash show. And
Forgot
then
about that.
yeah, he is just he's like a chameleon.
But Julia Roberts has starred in 2 horror movies herself, despite her feelings on the genre. Those would be, of course, Flatliners, 1990, and Mary Riley, 1996, co starring John Malkovich. It's kind of a Jekyll and Hyde story with
Okay,
John
I don't know that
Malkovich.
one.
Perhaps it's worth a watch. I
Maybe in a
I think
future
it's
episode.
I think it's kind of panned, and but it's still worth seeing for me, I think.
Nice.
Um, because I'm a completionist, and before I die, I want to see all the horror movies.
Oh, I thought you wanted to see all of the Julia Roberts horror movies. I'm like, well, you're
Oh,
done.
well, done. I'm almost halfway
Woohoo!
there. Back to the Blackcoat's Daughter, which also stars Kiernan Shipka before she was Sabrina Spellman, and Lucy Boynton, whose horror resume includes major roles in I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House and 2016's indie horror Don't Knock Twice. Obviously, I can't list everything these 3 tremendous actors have been in. I have cherry picked a handful of horror. But my point is, these ladies, along with some great supporting actors, make up a pretty solid cast, which is one of the great things about this movie. The Blackcoat's Daughter premiered at the 2015 Toronto International Film Festival and was then released theatrically in the US by A24. But 2 years later, kind of weird, mostly favorable reviews. However, it made so very little money at the box office. Do you know how much it made, Bill?
I already saw, so I'm not gonna. Well, I'll say it. Is it? Was it? Did we go with the 38 grand?
It was in the literal tens of thousands of
Yeah.
dollars. But to be fair, I don't want you to call it a box office bomb. That just seems mean because it was a very limited release and almost simultaneously got released for streaming, which doesn't set itself up for a fair contest, not being blockbuster material.
That seems kind of early for them because now that's a standard thing where they release it on the big screens and streaming at the same time. Like Halloween did that with the recent David Gordon
Yeah,
Green. That seems very early for them to be doing that in like 2015
it
around then.
wasn't a thing then. And I
Yeah.
think when you do that, it has to be something like Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't just work for some more obscure
First time
movie
director movie.
without
Yeah.
without a franchise behind it. And it takes some actual marketing, which I don't see any evidence that they did.
Hmm.
So it's almost like they didn't try to make money off of it, and I'm not sure why they didn't invest more in the release. Like, I don't understand enough about the movie business to be able to determine why these decisions are made. I know like A24 wasn't actually that big back then. It's kind of hard to
Mm-hmm.
think of now. And I've also heard this idea that perhaps they just wanted to do like the bare minimum theatrical release because then they're eligible for awards.
Ah, okay. That makes
But
sense.
anyway, because of the way that it was released, I don't think it's quite fair to say that it bombed at the box office because it's like they didn't even try to make money. Do you have any thoughts about that, Bill?
No, I was very, except to say I was very surprised to see that number because I was trying to think of like the reason. What month was this released? Do you know?
It was March 2017.
Okay, so kind of early, a little bit early. I don't know. Maybe the other stuff was released around the same time that maybe overshadowed it. We've seen that before. But yeah, I agree. I mean, with the cast especially, I feel like movies that are this stacked, there's some good actors and actresses in this. I just feel like it didn't get a good, fair spin, and I think marketing has a lot to do with that. And like you said, it doesn't sound like they threw a lot of marketing behind this. It's a first time director. That's always a little bit dicey. So could have just been a few different factors.
Yeah, like I know they can only, there's only so, it's kind of like airports. There's only so many slots for movies, and they
Right.
really have to choose their favorites, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Had you ever seen this movie before?
I had not. I had never even heard of this movie, so that tells you how good the marketing was. Until I started looking for movies that actually filled these two categories. So, with that being said, I did have three predictions that I would see in this movie, and I'm just gonna say right out of the gate, I did terribly.
Awesome.
I To give a little background, when I haven't seen a movie and I have to do like three things I want to see in the movie, I try not to look too deeply into it. I think I look at like a brief, like IMDb, like 8-word synopsis and like the cover. And for some reason, my mind went to The Craft. I don't know if it's because there's like three main young female characters. It's at like a boarding school. So my mind just immediately went to The Craft. So my three things I did based on kind of The Craft were a swimming pool, a snooty dean, and at least one instance of bullying. I'm just going to say I did not do well.
Very interesting. Well, depending on
Yes.
how you define bullying, but I'm not going to get into spoilers for sure right now.
That's my one. There could be a little wiggle room this episode. But had you seen this, Stacy?
I actually first watched it on some kind of streaming service, either Netflix or Shudder. I know that I saw it, I think, when it came out, because I saw it before I ever saw Sabrina the Teenage Witch, which came out in 2018. And I saw that as soon as it came out. And I know this timeline is true because when I rewatched The Blackcoat's Daughter this week, I could not stop thinking of Kiernan Shipka as Sabrina. And I definitely did not have that problem the first time I watched. Incidentally, I had the same problem last year with Shipka's newest horror movie, 1980s period slasher comedy Totally Killer, which is such a great movie, by the way. Highly recommended. Have you seen that one, Bill?
I have not. It's on my list, though.
It is right up your alley. There's a mass killer. There's even a
Yes.
podcaster. These are some of your favorite things, right?
I love podcasters and I love mass killers. What can I say?
Plus, there's time travel,
Ooh,
and it makes fun of like how problematic everything was in the 80s. It's just great.
excellent. I'll check it out.
So back to The Blackcoat's Daughter. I watched this one home alone, which is often the best way to watch a streaming movie. And the things that stood the test of time in my memory between then and now include creepy Catholic boarding school atmosphere, which is creepy enough on its own, but all the more creepy because school is closed for a break, and two of the main characters are stuck there in February. And I remembered it was February because of the giant calendar that Kieran Shipka X's the days off on with a Sharpie, I might add. And we get a really great squeaky Sharpie sound effect at least twice for that. Kudos to the Foley artist.
Do you happen to know the alternate or original title of this movie?
February.
There you go. How topical. But apparently they didn't think it would be marketable.
It wouldn't have been, but how much did that really matter in the end?
Yeah, exactly.
um, but I do remember the actual title of it catching my eye on the streaming service. Like, I was interested in it because of the title, and secondarily, I guess, whatever cover image they displayed. And I also, another weird thing that I learned because of this movie, I was like, what kind of cursed US school has a random 1 week break in February? And so I found out the answer is that it's the entire northeastern United States. Like, they get winter
Huh.
break in February around President's Day instead of spring break, which for us is in March, except in some places it's April. Anyway, I did remember that I liked the acting. It was strong, not just the leading ladies, but the other actors all around. And most saliently, I remember one major thing about the plot that I absolutely hated from the depths of my black soul. But for very spoilery reasons, we cannot go into that until later.
Oh, I can't wait to find out what it is.
Suffice it to say, if you have seen the movie, I'm confident there's at least a 50% chance you agree with me on this one. Content warnings. In addition to our standing content warning in the show notes, in this episode in particular, we discuss a movie that contains brutal violence and gore. You think that covers it, Bill?
I went with graphic beheadings and demonic possession, but yeah,
Spoilers!
Or is it?
I'm now going to go on with a quick spoiler-free plot synopsis. First, we meet Kat and Rose, played by Sabrina the Teenage Witch and Lucy Boynton, respectively, two Catholic boarding school students who are left behind at school with minimal supervision when the weird-ass American Northeast February break begins. Each of these characters has their own drama going on. Rose is a senior, and her personality is basically smoking cigarettes and worrying that she might be pregnant. Uh-oh. Then there's Kat, a lonely and soft-spoken freshman with above-average musical abilities that are never really mentioned again after the talent show in Act 1, so that was a choice, I guess. Kat kicks the movie off with a frightening dream about her parents dying. Now, in the real waking world, they are actually late to pick her up, and she can't reach them on the phone. Uh-oh. Rose gets unhappily tasked with looking out for Kat while their parents are MIA. Kat gets a mysterious phone call, and then Rose finds Kat in the boiler room behaving very, very strangely. No spoilers, though. In the meantime, elsewhere, a young woman named Joan is hitchhiking her way with a married couple who just happen to be driving to the same boarding school for some very spoilery reason. Where are Kat's parents? Is Rose really pregnant? Who is the mysterious hitchhiker? How will these disparate plot threads ever intertwine? You'll find out, and you can be sure we will discuss the unholy heck out of that last question right after our dark fact of the day. Over to you, Bill.
All right. So, our dark fact of the day, I actually delved into the weird world of possessions and exorcisms and found out some pretty interesting stuff. When you start looking at like religious sites for things like exorcisms, it's like the redheaded stepchild of the site. There's like a little blurb about it usually because I don't think they want to draw a lot of attention to that side of religion and Catholicism. But I did find some interesting things, such as there are 4 types of demonic activity that require an exorcism. The first is demonic possession, in which a demon uses someone's body as their own. They say that this is rare, I guess on the continuum of possessions. The next is demonic infestation, in which the presence of an evil in a location, such as a haunted house or an object like a voodoo doll. Then there is demonic vexation, which is a physical attack on a person's body, such as cuts, bite marks, or bruises. And then the last one is demonic obsession, in which the demonic attack is on someone's mind, not their body. So this can be the devil trying to get into someone's head so that everything they are thinking or experiencing is being filtered through the presence of a demon. And as a little bonus fact, the number of exorcisms has actually gone up substantially over the last 20 years. And as a result, more and more Catholic priests are getting into that side of the business. There used to only be about a dozen Catholic priests who would perform exorcisms in about 2005, and now there are over 150. So simple supply and demand. A lot of people need exorcisms, so priests are lining up to do them apparently. So those are your dark facts of the day. What do you think, Stacy?
Normally, after the dark fact of the day, I think I would like to, allow some silence for contemplation, but I have a theological question.
Yes.
So, last century, the Catholic Church, I wish I could remember exactly the event when this happened. They said that hell was not real, not a real place, just an idea.
Mm-hmm.
So wouldn't that mean that also Satan is not real, demons are not real, but at the same time, they're still doing exorcisms and even doing more exorcisms than ever before?
I don't know how those two jive. It's very strange. Although I did also look at the process that it takes. You apply to have an exorcism, And then you have to go through like a psychological test first to make sure, like, weed out any of that stuff. And then if you get approved, it's apparently like a weekly process that can go on for years, which is
Years,
crazy.
yeah.
So it's
not like the
it's not like
movies.
it's not like in the movies where, there's the priest goes in and it's, thunder and lightning, and then, the body raises up and then we're good. It's literally years of that stuff. So it's wild. Stuff like that intrigues me, where it's like a kind of legitimate thing, like the church. I'm just going to say kind of legitimate. And then it's like the redheaded stepchild of that kind of legitimate thing that they don't really talk about too much, but it's utterly fascinating because it takes place in movies all the time. So
I don't know if this is a nihilistic position. I hope it's not. But I'm kind of glad that like exorcisms are still a thing, because that totally fuels creative content in our preferred media, and perhaps life also reflects art. So hopefully we'll get lots of good exorcism stories for a long time to come.
I agree. Absolutely. For creative purposes. So now that we're done with the dark fact of the day, we're going to take a quick musical break here, and we'll be back with our spoilerific plot discussion. So we'll be right back. All right, we are back, and we are about to dive into the spoilerific plot discussion. So the movie starts, actually, before the movie even starts, I saw the A24 logo come up. Prior to this movie, I did not know this was an A24 film. Every time I see that come up, I get super excited because for me, it's some mark of excellence. With an A24 film, you're definitely getting good cinematography, an interesting story, and you're generally going to get some good performances. Those are like the three things I can kind of bank on, no matter what genre it is. But as Stacy, you were talking about earlier, this is a super early A24 film. So, I'm not sure how picky they were, how, involved they were at that point. But now, of course, every A24 film gets a ton of marketing behind it, and that's proudly displayed every, preview that you see. So thought that was interesting seeing kind of one of their earlier efforts. Do you have the same feeling about A24?
I do. Well, there are companies I stay away from. I won't mention which ones they are, but I do tend to choose movies mostly based on plot, like elements of the plot. There's certain, like, I'll see all the horror movies that come out in the theater and many of the other ones. But I do notice that A24 makes good movies. They picked up Talk to Me. I don't know if you saw that last.
I have not, no, but I did notice that was an A24 film, though.
Very polarizing on Reddit, because everything is polarizing on Reddit. But
I was just going to say, it's
I
a
don't know how you
cesspool.
could, I don't know how people could say it wasn't scary or wasn't a good movie. I thought it was both. Looking forward to the next one. Yeah.
Hopefully they already announced the sequel?
Yeah, they sure did.
Sweet. Yeah, I got to check that out. Anyway, we'll get back to the movie itself. So the movie opens with an old-timey song with lyrics about a Blackcoat's daughter. A young girl, we find out's name is Catherine, or Cat, awakens to a dark figure entering her room, and she says, "Daddy, you came early." They go outside in the snow. She's asking her dad where the car is, crying, "Mommy, Mommy," as she noticed that the car is just completely wrecked and mangled. Turns out this is a dream of sorts, and we cut to a scene where she's basically counting down the days on the calendar until Mom and Dad are here, which we find out later is Parents' Day at the school. The parents come pick their children up at the end of February for a week off of school before bringing them back. In the next scene, Kat meets with the head priest, Father Brian, and they start discussing her piano recital, which is going to be happening on Parents' Day. And he regrets to inform her that he cannot be there to see the recital performance, as he's going to be driving to Albany for some personal or some business, something or other. And she takes this very hard. This is kind of the first little inkling of kind of abandonment, which is a big theme throughout this movie, and we'll kind of keep coming back to throughout it. She starts to act very weird and kind of disconnected. She starts pressing him on, when is he coming back? She asks the very strange question when she's asking, how long is it going to take to get back? She goes, "So you think it'll be about the same amount of time coming back then?" Just really weird phrasing of questions. She starts to kind of look off into the corner and smile. She just has this very disengaged look on her face. So right out of the gate, Kat's character, you don't really know what's going on with her, but you can tell something is just not quite right, which we may find out something about a little bit later. And I am going to say this is a tricky movie to talk about because there's a little bit of non-linearness going on with it, so I'm going to try not to spoil things as we go along and kind of let them unfold the best that I can. Also with this conversation, it's just super eerie. It's very stilted, like someone will ask a question and then there's just silence for a while. It's just very eerie silence throughout this whole conversation, very uneasy.
How do you feel about doing that in movies where they just like, it's kind of an old-timey thing, like take extra time for them to think and respond. Like modern audiences, we don't tolerate that very well.
Which is why it probably comes off as so eerie because we're not used to it, even though that was probably, like you said, the norm back in the day when people actually had attention spans where you could actually, listen to two people have a normal discussion. That's a good point. So Father Brian seems to think she has a problem. He's kind of asking her, is something wrong? And then he comments on how she's been smiling a little bit off into the corner. And she kind of says, I hadn't even noticed I was smiling. So again, you get these little clues that something is just not quite right with Kat. We then cut to another student. We find out her name is Rose, a.k.a. young Lana Del Rey. In my mind, for some reason, she looks a lot like Lana Del Rey. I had never seen this actress in anything before. You had said you had, correct? What's her name?
Boynton,
Lucy Boynton. I really liked her in this movie, but she comes on the screen. She walks into like either the cafeteria or the gym. She sits down to get her school picture taken. And we get our first title card that says Rose. I believe we get 3. Are these called title cards? Am I using that right? I think that's.
I believe so.
Yeah, yes. Title cards. So we get, I believe, 3 title cards throughout this movie. And this is really where it sets up the interesting narrative device that's used throughout the movie. Sometimes to good effect, sometimes to maybe kind of confusing effect. So Rose is with the sisters, who I originally thought were nurses, but then I realized that the sisters are the nurses at this academy. And she's claiming to be sick. You get the feeling that she's kind of faking it. The nurse says something about, it's a shame to be sick over break. And then we cut to Rose talking to another girl. We find out that Rose thinks that she's pregnant, and she's deciding whether or not to tell the guy because she's also considering an abortion. So just your typical, high school problems, I guess.
Mildly rebellious.
Right. Yes,
Very
mildly rebellious. I think I think smoking a cigarette, so we know she's rebellious at this point.
That's the sign, yeah.
Always the giveaway. No leather jacket, I don't think, but definitely a cigarette. In the next scene, the parents start showing up. We get really super ominous music, and then we get Kat standing outside watching these cars driving in, with just a single tear rolling down her eye, which it's a little bit of a cheesy thing, but, it conveyed what it needed to. We then cut to Kat's piano recital, which I'm a little confused. Was this a recital or was this like a talent show? Because they only show her performing, but I think the priest called it a recital for some reason. So
yeah, I think it was a like a multi-student recital.
Okay.
There's one point, I think before the recital / talent show, where she's like standing in front of a closet full of like violins and you hear string music. So it sounds like they have like a robust music program. We just don't get to see any of it. Nor do we ever get to see her do anything musical either after this very eerie but like kind of good performance.
She starts playing a song and singing on the piano, and I had to look up what the song was because I was looking. I watch everything with subtitles, of course. I was watching the lyrics, and I was like, "Oh, these are kind of interesting lyrics." So the song is called "In the Garden" by Elvis Perkins, who is the director Oz Perkins' brother.
He wrote all the music for the movie, including the old-timey nursery rhyme at the beginning, which is not.
Did
really
he? I was going to
rhyme.
Double check. I figured that he did.
Yeah.
And he had me fooled because he seems to do a lot of different styles and does them really well.
Fun fact. Can I tell you a fun fact?
Yes, please.
Elvis was named Elvis after Elvis Presley because Norman Bates, his father, who's not really Norman Bates, Anthony Perkins was often told supposedly that he looked like Elvis Presley himself.
Huh.
Is that a fun fact? Woo!
That's a super fun fact. I'm trying to picture Anthony Perkins and Elvis in my mind.
He
Maybe a
does not
similar
look
hair,
like
maybe.
Elvis. Yeah.
No, maybe the hair, they're both kind of thin, I guess. That's maybe about the most I can give it, but that is a fun fact. That counts. But he does the whole soundtrack, and he does the score and everything, I'm pretty sure, which I have to kind of shout out at this point. I think the score is one of the bright points of this movie. And I think without this score, a lot of the segments in this movie would not be as effective. But I'll talk about that kind of more as we go through. But anyway, so she's performing this song In the Garden by Elvis Perkins, and she gets to the line that says, "Into the Black Night." She pauses briefly and then looks out at two empty chairs in the audience, presumably where her parents would have been sitting if they had showed up for Parents' Day. Wah wah. Next, we have Rose and Kat meet with the headmaster, Mr. Gordon, and the sisters, named Miss Prescott and Miss Drake, about why their parents did not come to pick them up. These are the two girls that apparently were left here. And Rose lies and tells them that apparently she told them the wrong day. Again, she just constantly lies about everything, and that they should be here in a couple of days to pick her up. Meanwhile, they've been unable to reach Kat's parents, but they're going to keep trying. Mr. Gordon tasks Rose with watching over Kat during this time period while they're the only people besides the sisters in the school. And Rose is totally put out by this because Kat's a freshman. Do we know how old Rose was? I don't know if it really matters, but I assume they were the same age.
18.
But okay, so maybe a couple of years older.
Rose is a senior.
Oh, okay.
And I think Kat's supposed to be 14.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's like a senior watching a freshman. Got it.
Uncool.
Uncool. Totally uncool. So then we get to the scene where Kat comes into Rose's room, and Rose then tells her a story about how all of the sisters' body hair is not real because supposedly it all got burned off while they were worshiping the devil. So just planting these fun little religious rumors, seeds in Kat's mind, who's already kind of dealing with all sorts of terrible abandonment stuff. Recipe for disaster, let's just say that. And then right after saying that, Rose abandons Kat to go hang out with her boyfriend. And constantly through the movie, Kat's trying to remind Rose that Rose is supposed to be watching her. She kind of throws this in every once in a while. You're supposed to be watching me. Mr. Gordon told, you're supposed to be watching me. Kat goes into Rose's room, looks at her hairbrush, stares at Rose's school pictures, and then the payphone rings in the hallway. And then it fades to black.
There's a lot of payphone action in this movie.
Yes, I appreciate that. It's a lost device in movies, sadly. What did you think about this whole setup, this whole kind of, getting us to understand that they're the only ones there? What did you think?
Overall, the first time through, I thought this was an intriguing setup. I really liked both of the actors. And I have more to say about the sisters later. and the body hair story or whatever. Great story. But is it believable that they would be left with that little supervision? I mean, I know this was this in like the 20 teens?
Yes.
Aughts? So it wasn't that long ago. I just can't imagine like liability standpoint, like that they would, because they're in that dormitory building by themselves. The sisters live in a separate house.
Right. And the only interaction that they have with the sisters is mealtimes. As we see. Really, that's it.
Seems very dangerous.
Yeah, it's hard to say what else they would do. They're kind of in a bind. Obviously the sisters are the only ones going to be there, and they weren't expecting the parents not to pick them up.
So someone else needs to be there. They need to hire someone else is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like if you were the parents, would you be okay with how it was handled?
Oh, God, no.
Right.
No, I agree. And clearly, Rose just leaves to go hang out with her boyfriend. So there's just no supervision at all. But I did think they did a pretty good job of just kind of efficiently getting into the plot without having to, climb through too many tunnels. In terms of the actress that plays Kat, I had never seen her in anything. I never saw Sabrina. But it's funny. So I watched this twice. The first time I watched it, I wrote down, I wonder if she's done a lot of TV, because I don't know what it is about her performance, but she just seems like a TV actress, and that's not necessarily a dig. It's just a certain way that she carries herself, mostly in like the first part of the movie. But I did like her performance, so I'm not ragging on her. I'll get into that more later. So Rose abandons Kat to go out with her boyfriend, fades to black, and we get our first scene outside of the school campus in the form of a young woman named Joan, played by the great Emma Roberts, getting off a bus looking exhausted and rather paranoid. She has flashbacks of doctors aggressively trying to treat her, and we learn that she has escaped from a hospital as she rips off her medical bracelet. She proceeds to make a call from, again, a payphone, but the number is disconnected.
Do we ever know who she's calling there?
That was going to be one of my questions. Based on what happens a little later, would it be her parents' number, maybe? It's hard to say.
Was that the bus stop that she was inside? I'm not familiar with, like, the building that she was inside when she made the call. I was like, where is this happening? Okay.
Yeah, that should have been the bus. The bus drops her. I think it was some sort of bus stop, because I think when she goes back, so she goes back outside after this, sits on a bench, and a man named Bill, played by the great James Remar, who I loved in Dexter, who played Dexter's dad, approaches her as she sits on a bench and offers to give her a lift because she says she's going to Plymouth?
Portsmouth.
No,
Portsmouth.
not Portsmouth. Sorry, she's going to Portsmouth. And I don't know if Bill says necessarily where they're headed, but they're headed in that direction, I think he says. So he offers to give her a lift. She gets in the car with him and his wife, Linda, played by Lauren Holly, who I was so happy to see in this movie. Very similar to how we saw Alicia Silverstone in The Lodge. Similar thing where I'm like, I have not seen Lauren Holly in anything in way too long.
Aren't they great as a couple?
They are. Yeah. Yeah. I think, and that's what you meant with some of like the supporting cast. It's fantastic. Like those two just, chef's kiss. So she gets in the car and sees a bouquet of flowers next to her. As the car drives off, we see a Bramford bumper sticker, which is the name of the school and the city that the school is in?
Both. I was wondering
which I
if
did
you
not
caught
mention
that.
earlier. Yes. Yeah, you see a little Bramford bumper sticker. So clearly this couple has something to do with the Bramford school that we just saw in earlier scenes. So we cut back to the boarding school, and Rose returns from her date, walks into Kat's room, and sees an empty bed. Doesn't think much of it, goes to the bathroom, hears a loud noise coming from the vent, and I thought this was a really cool piece of sound design here. The vent kind of gives this weird white noise ambiance for this whole scene, which I love when they do that, where they incorporate something from the scene to give it, instead of just putting music over the top, they incorporate a sound from the scene to actually kind of ratchet up the tension. So you hear that, and then Rose looks around super confused. She starts hearing slamming sounds, and then in a muffled voice through the vent, she hears the words, "Sounds good." And I had to watch this with subtitles so I didn't quite catch it the first time. So she walks out of the bathroom to investigate, continuing to hear sounds, and she very slowly walks down the stairs. In my notes, I feel like there's like 20 minutes of padding that was added to this movie just with walking. There's a lot of slow walking.
Building tension.
That's right, building tension. Sorry, not padding, building tension. So she heads to the basement and she peeks into the furnace room and sees Kat aggressively prostrating in front of the furnace. And this is just an incredibly spooky visual. This is what you need at this point in the movie. This movie is definitely a slow burn, so unless you have these types of scenes, it can get a little bit tiresome to get through. What did you think about this scene, Stacy?
I thought it was perfect timing, and I liked that we couldn't really see details. We basically see like her silhouette, and like she's not even just normal prostrating, like she's flailing herself. I don't know. It's so wild.
It's like sitting down headbanging almost. It's like,
it was a really interesting like choice for the movement, and it's like I think it's much more unsettling that way.
Yes, I agree. And I didn't realize it was her when I first watched it because I thought the woman looked bald. So I'm thinking like, oh, it must be one of the sisters. But upon rewatching it, I think it's clear. And then based on the next scene, which we'll talk about in a second, it's definitely Kat who's in that room. So that's kind of the end of Act 1, as I put it. We then move on to the next title card, which is Joan's title card. And again, Joan, played by Emma Roberts, not to get these characters too confused. We'll try to keep this grounded here. Joan wakes up in a hotel room and begins having flashbacks to someone firing a gun and a priest looking down at her in a dark room. So definitely she's had some sort of traumatic events happen in her past. We're not entirely sure what those are yet, but we start getting some clues as we see an entry and exit wound in her shoulder as she goes into the bathroom. So they start dropping some little crumbs here throughout the next few scenes. Bill comes to her room to check on her, and then she asks him why he's helping her, and he responds with, "Do you believe in God, Joan?" And in my notes I said, "Oh, fuck, there's always strings attached." And then he proceeds to say that she reminds him of someone that he hasn't seen in a long time. That, mixed with the fact that she's going to Portsmouth, makes it a coincidence that he cannot ignore. He says that he sees God in her, and Bill and his wife are going to Bramford, not Portsmouth. So we start to learn a little bit about what's going on here.
Bill, I think there's a baby elephant in the room right now. He knocks on her door. She just got out of the shower and she's in a towel.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think it's weird enough that she opens the door, but then what is the correct thing for him to do when he sees that she's in a towel?
You would probably avert your eyes and be like, "Oh, do you want me to come back in a few minutes?" Something like that.
Exactly. But no, he just walks right in and sits down. And is he supposed to be weird in this movie?
There are so many things like this that they plant in the movie, and I don't know how many of them are conscious or not. Yes, at this point, I was getting very weird vibes from him. And even actually, when he picks her up originally, she's very not trusting of him. He has to convince her that his wife's in the car, so like to appear not threatening. And there's multiple times that he says stuff like that to kind of appear not threatening. She's very reticent with him. I have a feeling that, yes, he was trying to make him a little bit like almost like a creepy father figure, the way that he speaks to her.
Yeah.
Right after that, she starts nervously asking him things like, "When do we leave?" Asking where his wife is. So again, you're getting this thing where she's not a very trusting person, especially in her current state. She doesn't necessarily know how to read this guy. However, he is helping her, so, take that for what it's worth. So then we go back to the school, and Rose is asking Kat why she was down there in the boiler room, of course, and not really getting answers, and then starts asking about Kat's parents. At this point, Kat kind of comes out of the closet. I guess she was putting on some clothes or something, and she looks noticeably different than just a few scenes ago. Early on in the movie, her hair is like pulled back in like really tight braids, and she comes out of the closet now, and her hair is completely down, and she has like some darkness around her eyes, like very similar to actually kind of how Joan looked when she was getting off the bus. Just looked like hell, kind of like. So I definitely noticed that. And Kat then says that her parents aren't going to call. And then she mentions again about how Mr. Gordon said that Rose should be watching her. Again, she constantly harps on this. And then we get some really creepy dialogue at this point. This is really where things start to ratchet up. And Kat says,
"Mr. Gordon said worst case they'd be here by Friday."
Yeah, I know what he
Now
said.
it's too late.
Too late for what?
They're dead.
What? That is an awful thing to say. You shouldn't say things like that. You shouldn't say things like that. Okay? It's just not funny.
You smell pretty.
"What is this line? This happens twice in the movie. I could not make heads or tails of this."
This to me is like something else speaking for her. Like it's a very predatory sentiment. It's not a compliment. That's how I read it.
Okay, gotcha. So whatever's inside her is starting to present itself a bit more.
Yes, and you can tell For one thing, she's standing there in the dark and she was on the phone in the dark. That's pretty weird. And then like she steps into the light of Rose's room, and that's when she says it. And Rose does not look like it was a compliment whatsoever. Do we think
No.
that like Rose is starting to sort of care about Kat or worry about her like as a human at this
I would
point?
say worry. I don't know if care is the word at this point. Definitely worry, though. I think she started, and maybe it's just a selfish, what the hell am I like being partnered with right now?
Right.
Because we'll find out what happens here in a minute. But as Rose is kind of slowly backing out of the room, she says,
Is there anything else I can get you?
No. You had your chance.
a super ominous line that I loved. But then Rose goes to proceed. She goes into her room and quickly pushes her chair against the door, knowing that something is wrong with Kat. So, yes, there is a seismic shift going on in this scene. As this is kind of one of those points in the movie where things are definitely starting to take a turn. Because up to this point, Kat was just kind of a weirdo in Rose's eyes, really. But now she is fearing for her own safety, being locked in a school with her.
Different kind of weirdo now.
Yes, the not fun kind
Like
of weirdo.
the dork that goes dark.
Yes. Then we get a shot of Kat in her bed. Her body jerks around, and then all of a sudden it bends backwards at the hip. And yep, it's gotten real now. We have some sort of possession, demonic possession going on here. I don't like that they put this scene in the movie. I'm just going to throw that out there. I think it was a little obvious, I guess, or just kind of unnecessary. I think it like shoves it in your face all of a sudden, this thing that they've been really slowly building nicely.
I almost always find scenes, even in the best movies, where they do this, and I feel like they're trying to include like the mainstream audience who
Right.
aren't as familiar with the formula.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's a cool looking shot. Also, maybe they
Sure.
just wanted to leave it in. It's kind of a nod to The Exorcist.
Right.
But I also agree with you that it wasn't like necessary, and it doesn't really look like any of the other scenes.
Yes, maybe that's my problem with it. It stands out like a sore thumb. It's just the tone is just way off, and not in like oh, that's shocking and so interesting. It's just like, okay, we've seen that a lot, but why did you shove this scene in this particular spot? But
Agreed.
I don't know. It takes away the little bit of the mystery that I think they were building really nicely up to this point.
It does.
But that's neither here nor there. The next scene, we cut back to another scene with Bill and Joan. They're sitting at the motel diner, and he's talking about how they spent a lot of time at this diner with their daughter, and says that Joan reminds him of his daughter and how she would have been her age, and that they lost her 9 years ago. Tomorrow is the anniversary of her death. So they're starting to plant these seeds, and then turns out that they're bringing her flowers, and then, dun dun dun, he pulls out a picture of Rose to show her. Bill's daughter is Rose.
Do you notice it's the yearbook picture?
Absolutely, yep, that they kept coming back to at the beginning.
We wondered, like, why is this picture such a big deal? Like,
right
in those scenes. But
mm-hmm.
Here it is. Here it is.
Here it is. Yep.
It's coming back later too.
Dun dun dun. But what I was confused about, and that this might be a super minor point, so they're bringing flowers to Bramford. Are they putting them, is she buried in Bramford? Like, usually you put flowers on people's graves on, like, the anniversary of a death. But they don't live in Bramford, so I don't think you'd bury your loved one in some random city. Or are they, like, placing them at the school, maybe? Like a memorial?
I think later on we kind of see where somebody may have left something like that before, so maybe there is a place.
Okay, maybe I missed that. Okay, fair enough. Okay, so after Joan sees this picture, she goes into the bathroom and lets out a slight giggle, and then has a flashback to someone getting strangled with a belt, and then someone holding an ID that says Joan Marsh from Rhode Island. So at this point, we realize that clearly this girl has broken out of the mental institution, has killed an orderly, and taken her identity. So things just start ramping up real quick at this point. She walks out of the bathroom, sees Bill talking to a police officer, eyes a steak knife that's in the sink. Again, just super paranoid. All of these things to show you that she's just totally on edge and just kind of out of her mind. Gets in the car with Linda, Lauren Holly's character, and she asks Joan, "What did he tell you?" Basically implying that he does this all the time. It sounds like every year at this time, they drive back to Bramford. He must pick up young women and try to help them, I guess. Tells them that they look like his daughter. So she's at the point where she's just like, did he do it again? That kind of thing. Almost kind of sick of it in a way. Linda tells Joan that Bill sees Rose in every young girl, but that she doesn't see Rose in Joan at all. So there are some really interesting conversations here.
Not only does she not see it in her at all, she says,
"You don't look anything like her." It's strange. I can't see you at all.
"I can't see you at all." What a weird ass thing to say.
This whole section is one of those where I'm like, I love this, but I don't know why, because it's very confusing.
One idea is that we're getting a little bit of hostility from Linda, and there's also some like eerie music playing. So I'm thinking, are they wanting us to think that maybe the couple is up to no good somehow?
That could be. That very well could be.
We don't know how Rose died.
No, we do not. Linda then tells a story, a very strange story about being in a supermarket alone. Oh, I'm sorry. So I guess she says she doesn't see how any of these girls look like their daughter except once. And she tells a story about being in a supermarket alone, and a young girl in a school uniform, about 15, was looking on a low shelf for something, holding money tight in her hands. And then she had her hair in a ponytail. You could see the roots being pulled back from her ears. Just a very odd story. If I were Joan, I'd be like, what the hell are you talking about? I'd be like leaving that car. But anyway, but then she says, you don't look anything like her. It's strange. I can't see you at all, like you had just said. Yeah. So just a very ominous conversation with just Linda and Joan. And then Bill gets back in the car and they move on. We then cut to the boarding school during the daytime. Rose sees Kat put down the phone, again, the payphone, and asks,
What did they say?
He said it's all right.
Wait, what's all right? Who says?
He says I can't live here. But I can, with him.
Who's he?
You know who?
No, I don't know.
Mr. Gordon. Silly. He's the headmaster.
Oh.
You smell pretty.
So at this point, Rose is like, what the hell is going on? So Kat's talking to Mr. Gordon and trying to figure out whether she can stay here. It's just a very, again, weird conversation she's having on this payphone. This next shot, it's a super minor shot, but I love it. We cut to Rose and Kat eating dinner with the sisters, and Rose goes into the kitchen, opens a drawer, and you see a bunch of knives on top, and you're like, oh, she's going to grab a knife. Nope, she grabs like a soup ladle or a soup spoon out from underneath. I thought that was a nice little touch that they threw in there. They probably thought they were pretty clever, and I appreciated it, to be honest. So they sit down to eat with the sisters. The sister asks Kat if there is something wrong. Again, throughout the movie, everyone's asking her if there's anything wrong. And as she's not reciting grace. That's right. So, they all recite grace together. Kat's not reciting it. So then they ask Kat to repeat grace. She starts to, but then stands up and vomits all over, as any good possession-type movie would have. Rose questions the sisters about whether they've been in touch with Mr. Gordon, based on the previous conversation that she had with Kat. And the sister, I forget which one, responds with, why would Mr. Gordon call here? Basically being like, what
I mean,
what are you
he
talking
works
about?
there, but
Yeah. But
that's
why would
kinda
she
weird.
be? Why would he be in contact with Kat directly? I guess without the sisters knowing, etc. They try to get Kat to drink something, and she says,
Get your hands off me, cunt.
just one of those great lines. Rose and the sisters are obviously shocked. And at this point, Miss Drake takes a call in the other room and summons Miss Prescott. And then Kat says something goofy. She's like, he'll come and say that he was wrong. This time he will say that I can live here. He is the headmaster. So again, all these just ominous things that she's spewing out one after the other. The sisters ask Rose to shovel the path outside as Mr. Gordon will be arriving later this afternoon. And did you get the impression that the call that they received was to confirm that Kat's parents were dead?
100%. Like, my feeling was, you have Kat standing there looking ghastly, and she's just said this terrible thing. I mean, this is a pretty serious behavior infraction. But one of the sisters gets the phone and then calls the other one in. So this is clearly like important enough to leave the misbehaving child. I mean, she could have just run off with that.
Right.
You know, so I feel like it was some serious bad news. And I assumed that was the news.
Yes. And I kind of like that Rose kind of complains that she has to shovel. So she still got a little bit of that. But why? Even though there's just like crazy shit going on. Yeah. I kind of appreciated that. So Rose goes outside to shovel. She starts hearing an organ playing Jesus Loves Me, knocks on the sister's door. Oh, so weird. This always works for me. I know it's like a trope when you play like old hymns or, stuff in horror movies, but it works for me every time. She knocks on the sister's door, no response. Rose goes back to her room to lay down. Meanwhile, Mr. Gordon, again the headmaster, and the police officer show up to that same house, and you get a really spooky shot that includes like records kind of scratches in the background while the camera spins 360 inside the house. And then you see Mr. Gordon walk in. He sees some blood smeared on the wall and gasps. End of scene. We now get our final title card, which is Kat's title card.
Which is my favorite timeline.
Yes, this is this is where the good stuff happens here. So it starts with a scene from the beginning of her crossing off the days on her calendar, and then we see her taking a bath. So again, the calendar, I think, happened right after she had that initial dream. I'm going to try to keep some of this chronology straight here. So she had that dream, then she started crossing days off the calendar, then she goes to take a bath, and we see a dark shadow of a creature in the bathroom. So this is the first visual sign of any sort of demonic presence that I think we have.
Would you like to describe the creature?
I don't know if it's in this scene. He kind of, you get bits and pieces of this creature, but he has some horns.
They're like straight up.
Yeah, they're. I don't know if this is like a classic representation of a demon. This is one of my problems with the movie. The demon does not look scary to me. He looks kind of like cute almost. He looks like something from like Monsters, Inc. or something, which I think is a big missed opportunity. However, it didn't totally ruin the movie for me. But yes, it's a very strange representation of a demon. Anyway, Kat then places a call on a payphone and is answered with a scratching and distorted low voice saying, So this gives you the idea that her quote-unquote possession took place very early in the timeline of the movie, because this was, again, pretty much the first few minutes of the movie. Like, this is before she even met with the Father Brian, I think. Like, probably right before that. So this starts to fill in some of those gaps that we've been wondering as to why she's been acting the way she's been acting throughout the entire movie. Back at school, Kat sits down at the piano. There's a bunch of weird, intense Middle Eastern type music in the background. Presumably she's playing her recital. Then we cut to the scene where Rose is telling her about the sister's body hair or lack thereof. And we see it from Kat's perspective this time.
Oh.
And in the corner, you see that same black creature standing behind Rose.
And do you kind of hear like another voice along with Rose's voice?
I didn't, but that's certainly possible.
And maybe
like a deeper voice, kind of.
Maybe I'm possessed, but I think it was. I think it was Shadow Demon guy talking through Rose, because
Okay.
and I have more theories about this, but I think that's why we got this fucked up story when Rose normally would be like, "Don't say things like that," you know. Rose was not that kind of girl.
No, I agree. That's a good point. This scene was super effective. This whole set of scenes here, I love how they did this. How they circle back and you get a different perspective. Then we hear the payphone ringing. She hesitantly picks it up. You get more static, and then the same voice says, "You can stay here with me." At this point, it's going to be hard to kind of get through this plot because there's a lot of back and forth and just craziness, which is kind of one of my problems with this movie, but we'll get there. Then we cut to see the sisters are dying on the floor. The two of them are on the floor in their house, just bloody, gasping for life. And Kat is walking into the basement. And then, this is super confusing. She walks into the basement, which is kind of the beginning timeline. And then you see her walk past the sisters up the stairs to get 2 pillowcases. Then she comes back down, kneels down, and stabs one in the back multiple times, like super violence.
Brutal.
Yeah, just like was not expecting that level of violence at this point. Then we get Rose waking up and looking at her belly in the mirror. She goes to the bathroom and is relieved to see that she's gotten her period and is obviously not pregnant. However, her relief is short-lived as she starts to hear a noise and goes to investigate. So she walks out of there, she goes to the stairwell, and she sees the bag, I guess it's a bag of heads at the bottom of the stairwell. Kat comes from behind, stabs Rose multiple times, and then she just creepily stands there looking like possessed, robotic, while she waits for Rose to die.
She's really good at staring, Kiernan Shipka.
Yes.
Lots of footage of her staring.
I really like this dark portrayal of her more than the beginning of the movie. Like, this stuff works really well for me for this actress. I thought it was fantastic.
I am going to quibble with you. I don't think she comes from behind. I think Rose turns around, looks down the other end of the hallway, looks clear. She starts walking that way, and then Sabrina the Teenage Witch comes out of the shadows, and it's really quick. It's almost like jump scare. And I think it's like maybe the scariest death scene in the movie.
You are probably right. I think my whatever you call it, my location was a little off there at that point. But yes, it was definitely shocking. Yes. and goes on for the rest of the movie. So yeah, she waits for Rose to die, sheds a single tear, again, just like the beginning of the movie where she's waiting for her parents and they don't come and she gets a tear. And then she pulls Rose up by the hair with a knife in her other hand and presumably decapitates her at this point.
Oh, we don't see that, right?
Nope. No, we don't. Then we cut to a new scene where a policeman and Mr. Gordon, we go back to the policeman and Mr. Gordon scene. They show that again. And they see a trail of blood in the snow. They see blood on the front window in the stairwell. And then they go downstairs and find Kat kneeling in front of the furnace with 3 heads next to her. I don't know if you noticed this, but the furnace room or the boiler room looked very weird in this scene. I don't know if it was like the color grading or something, but it looked almost like AI generated. It's so hard to describe. It just was really off-putting. It didn't look like it did in any of the other scenes. It was throwing me off. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. The cop tells her to drop the knife, and she slowly puts her hands above her head and says, What did you think about this scene?
You said that it looked different in there, and I don't think I noticed that, but I noticed that it sounded different. Like his voice, the cop's voice, sounded very dissociatedly. Like it didn't sound like what you would expect to hear. And I'm wondering, did we hear that because she was hearing things distorted?
Right.
Because she's definitely not distorted when she screams "Hail Satan."
This is one of my issues actually with this. His voice sounds distorted as if you were listening to like a handheld recording of it. Like in
Yeah.
an evidence locker. Like if you were playing this for someone, that's what his voice sounds like when he's yelling at her to, like, drop the knife or whatever he says. It was a very odd choice directorially. This whole scene was a letdown for me. I'm not gonna lie, for a few reasons. That whole thing, that choice was very strange, and then the whole Hail Satan thing. It was almost comical. It just did not.
I laughed at this moment.
It did not get me. They could have made this so creepy, and they decided to go with a very cliche version of that. And it pains me because this is like the scene that we were like building up to. So I was a little let down by that.
I mean, maybe Sabrina the Teenage Witch, with the aid of her demonic friend, is kind of being a little performative at this point.
Yep. Yeah, I could see that. So, end scene, we get to a new scene again, back with Joan driving towards Bramford with Bill and Linda. Bill and Linda are like arguing about kind of what they were talking about earlier, about all this stuff that Bill keeps telling all these young girls. And then they let it slip that they had a hard time confirming Rose's identity because her head was severed from her body. So a nice little detail there. And of course, Joan is in the back seat listening to all of this. Joan wants to get out of the car. Linda wants him to keep driving, so he pulls over. And Joan stabs both of them rather aggressively, very similar to how Kat was stabbing the sisters not too long ago. Interesting. She then seems surprised at what she had done and throws up. Then she goes back to sever Bill's head in a very kind of awkward scene. She, like, you can't quite tell how comfortable she is with any of this. Like, she seems a little bit like, oh God, what am I doing? But she's still doing it.
Kind of like, I gotta do what I gotta do, but
yeah, I'm not enjoying this quite as
distasteful.
much. Yes, distasteful. There you go. It's a good word.
Why do we think Linda didn't want him to pull over there? She like almost cried about it.
I don't know. Did Joan say she was going to Portsmouth?
Yes.
But we know that Bill and Linda were going to Bramford. And this was Bramford, basically, right? Or do we not know if this was technically...
I don't think we know, but
okay.
Maybe...
I don't think it was far, though.
Maybe it's not far, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, this gets a little bit confusing here. So then Joan goes to take a suitcase out of the car and places their heads in it, calmly applies makeup to her blood-smeared face, and then starts presumably walking away. We then start getting our questions answered. We cut to Kat waking up in the mental hospital, arms in restraints, and Father Brian is waiting for her. And he basically goes and performs an exorcism on her, saying, "You are not wanted here. I say you will go from this place," trying to expel the demon from her body. So we cut back and forth between that and Joan walking the streets with her suitcase and going to the boarded up house door. And then Kat rises from the bed, falls, and then sees the silhouette of the demon with the horns and says, "Don't go." So she doesn't want this demon expelled from her body for plenty of reasons. Joan goes down to the boiler room with her suitcase, sees that it is dark and cold and that the demon is no longer there. Dejected, she walks down a snowy road with blood on her face. She's sobbing and wailing, realizing that she is truly alone. And that's pretty much it. They stay on her face for a little bit, fades to black, and we get that same old-timey song that played at the beginning. What an ending.
Yeah. So we know now that Joan is Kat. Like, I could say
9
that
years
now.
later.
Okay,
yes.
okay.
Yes.
Just making sure.
And I was trying to figure out where we were supposed to know that in the film. Like, I don't know if they make it explicitly clear where they're kind of nodding to the audience. I mean, I think when you see Joan, you see the bullet wound earlier, and then you see the altercation with the cop. That for me was like, okay,
Yes. I think that's
what
it.
it is.
That's the nod.
Okay.
So is Joan Kat inconsolable in the road now because she finally feels remorse for what she's done? Or is it because she realizes the demon is truly gone for good and she is completely alone? Or is it a little from column A, a little from column B? What do you think?
A big thumbs up to this movie that it has you asking these questions, because you can take this as a paranormal movie In which case, yes, she was totally abandoned early on. Her only friend, her only companion was this demon who's been guiding her. So she goes back to see him and now he's gone. That's what makes her sad. That's the paranormal one. The non-paranormal is that she goes back and realizes that he was never there and that everything she has done in the last 10 years is of her own volition and that she suffers from severe mental illness. And either way, she's alone. But now she has to deal with everything that she's done due to her mental illness with no, I don't know if tangible is the right word, but no thing necessarily guiding her aside from her mental illness. Which I like that version a little bit better.
I thought you might.
Rather than the demon abandoning her, I like that the whole thing's been in her head the whole time.
I would love the opportunity to tell you why I think that is wrong.
Oh, okay. Please. I might know why, but please tell me.
So there's a couple of like theories that are tied together here, but let's just go back to the exorcism, which is really just a quick moment in the hospital after Kat's crazy antics. Why does the father assume that Kat is possessed? Like, how do we make that jump? She did a horrible, horrible thing. That's for sure. But I mean, that's not usually why people commit murders. So this gives rise to a theory that I have that maybe the school already knew that they had some kind of demonic infestation. Like maybe they should have called the Ghostbusters already, because like you remember Rose's wild story that I thought the demon was helping out with about sisters getting their eyebrows burned off. Maybe that was real. And on that note, isn't it weird that they call them the sisters, but they don't seem to be nuns at all? Like I understand that they don't really wear habits anymore, but they don't address each other as Miss Drake and Miss Prescott like they do in this movie. Like it's always sister somebody and sister somebody else.
Good point.
But they also don't seem to be biological sisters to each other. So an idea consistent with my theory is that after their run-in with the devil some years ago, as told by Rose, they were defrocked, so to speak. Although that's funny. That's not actually the correct term for nuns. What would that be? Dehabited? They were dehabited, but they still kept their jobs there. Because they got better.
It's hard to find good nuns.
Sure is. Also, wasn't it pretty weird that the sisters thought something was seriously wrong with Kat, like just because she wasn't praying exactly right? It seems like they took that pretty hard and seemed very worried, almost like they knew what was happening. Like, maybe this has happened before. So that's my theory. And then the fact that in the hospital, when Father O'Brien is saying, you're not welcome here, go away and never come back, Kat does a little levitation. And they don't make it very, like, I think they want you to wonder, but it is enough for, like, I think Father O'Brien to notice. And, like, it is the extent of what she could levitate with her constraints. So I think that is a nod to the paranormal interpretation right there.
Those are good points. I agree. I will say, when you were talking about how the sisters and the father were looking at her actions and then deciding that she was possessed, it could also speak to the lack of understanding in the church about mental issues. To just jump to say, this girl beheaded someone, that is insane same for anyone, but like, especially of a girl that age, it must be something supernatural, as opposed to trying to look at a mental health reason for it. It speaks to that old school mentality, I think, of the Catholic Church. And, if someone's acting that oddly and that, murderous, there must be the devil inside them. So it could be that. However, the reason why I hate that scene where she bends her body in half, because that is the one, that and where she rises in the exorcism. They had to put those two things in the movie, and that kind of kills the mental, I guess the non-paranormal explanation.
Does. But I think my story's better.
I agree. Hey,
I think we could do it without those two scenes with my story. But yeah.
Get rid of those damn scenes. They're too much.
I like the fact that we don't really know. I think that's
I agree.
a nice aspect.
And especially that last scene, the last scene is just shot so well, and it just leaves it so open-ended. But either way, you get this like just depressed feeling in your gut watching her walk out of there at the end and just like looking, being like, no matter which explanation, she has nothing now. She is,
it's over.
Her life is fucked. She's going to have to deal with whatever she did for the rest of her life, demon or not. And it was all for nothing, which is super sad. Very kind of a nihilistic ending, really.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I go.
You go.
I'll go. How do we feel about her culpability? How much of what she did is Kat's fault? Whether it's mental illness or possession, it seems like by the end she's not possessed anymore. She's just trying to get back to where she was, like complete the steps of the ritual to, almost have a redemption in a like satanic way.
Interesting.
And then it's a failed redemption, and she does seem to then realize she's fucked. How do we feel about that? Is she responsible only for the stuff that she did as an adult? Does that have anything to do with it?
I think it does. Well, I mean, if you're talking like, are we talking like court of law? Like she would be on trial for all this. Like, would she? I mean, I think she would plead mental insanity and probably get away with it. But it also depends. What did they do to her in the hospital for 9 years?
Right.
Like, was she treated?
Exactly.
Right. I mean, was she on medications? I mean, they would dig into all that, I imagine, because you don't really. It's hard to tell her mental state. I guess we'll just say Joan's mental state. Very much like the whole thing where she kind of giggles in the bathroom lets off a little bit. Like, okay, there's still something going on inside there. She's not well, but. That's a good question. I hadn't thought about culpability. I don't know. What do you think?
So, I think that if she's not mentally ill and if she was formerly possessed, but definitely not mentally ill, then she is culpable for killing the couple. I don't think she has culpability either way when she's 14 and either possessed or out of her mind.
Yeah.
Whichever it is. My answer about her adulthood culpability could also be changed by, like you said, what they did to her in the institution, which we don't know. Maybe it was a great experience and she got art therapy every day, and there's a therapy dog that would visit on Thursdays, and
yeah.
I don't get the feeling it was really like that. They don't really give us any clues, but it also didn't necessarily seem abusive. So
no.
We don't know. Like maybe spending 9 years in an institution when you're not really mentally ill, if she wasn't, could make you mentally ill. I could see how that could happen.
Well, and plus she had just lost both of her parents, like in a horrible, I'm assuming it's a horrible car crash. Like that would also be taken into account. Like it's a series of events, basically. Like if this were to go to court and she had a good lawyer, they would point to all these things and be like, for someone her age to try to deal with all these things while being at a school that basically, talks about demons and all this crap all the time, like it wouldn't be far-fetched. So I think, it's a good question. I think the adult Kat would be more culpable for sure, but I'm not too sure to what extent.
Do you have other lingering questions about that kind of thing?
Not that necessarily. No, I think I'll get into a little bit more with my alternate ending idea, perhaps.
If you don't mind, before we get there, I'd like to address the big elephant in the room.
Yes.
Which is so bad that it's an insult to elephants. And I say that with you already knowing how many things I do like about this movie. So I don't think it's a lost cause. But I'm just going to go off now and lay it down. And here's where the movie absolutely falls apart for me and many other people, I'm sure. It's the reveal that Joan is actually Kat, but aged 9 years. This is not a twist. This is a cheap trick. And I will tell you why. Because the only way that we don't immediately know that they are the same person is because a different actor was cast to play Kat as her 9 years older self. Come on. So,
Looks nothing like her.
let's think about what a genuine plot twist has to include. It has to be a plot development or a reveal that is unexpected yet logical within the context of the story. And it's an event that makes you change your understanding of the narrative and or the characters, and makes you reevaluate previous events in light of the new information. So in retrospect, the twist has to make sense looking back over everything that happened in the movie, or if you watch it a second time, it has to stand up.
Yes.
We must be able to think that we could have figured out the twist if we were paying attention. I think that makes it fair. But we couldn't because we were intentionally misdirected by the filmmakers. So the twist fails in all of those things. It fails at making retrospective sense. It fails at being unexpected because the only way it's unexpected is if you cast a completely different actor as Joan. Otherwise, we would know all along. That's cheap. And thirdly, this twist fails at being logical in the story world itself for two reasons. A, people, especially women, don't look entirely different at age 23 from their age 14 selves unless they gain or lose a massive amount of weight or get plastic surgery or transition genders maybe, or something extreme. B, there's no way that the parents of the murder victim wouldn't recognize their daughter's murderer even 9 years later. 9 years in normal time is like 18 months in middle-age years. I mean, that shit also stays with you. The person who murdered your family member, you know? I'm all for a good twist. I think twist is a really important device in horror. When done right, it can change a good movie into a great movie. But this is just a hollow attempt at shock without putting any of the hard work of crafting the narrative so that it actually makes sense. It's insulting to the audience. A good twist has to be earned, and nothing at all was earned here. The prosecution rests.
I have a rebuttal. Is that a thing?
That is a thing. Excellent.
Cross-examination, something like that. I completely agree. This is the biggest glaring issue with this movie. I found myself, while watching it a second time, trying to almost like speak on the director's behalf and come up with ideas about how he maybe was really smart and made this work. So my explanation, if I were to the director, I would say that obviously Rose's parents are suffering from like severe trauma, like they're, especially the dad, he's just like, you know, lost in the world. We might be seeing Kat from their perspective, and they don't recognize her because for some reason they have, maybe their grief has manifested in a way where they just can't even see people for who they are. So maybe that's what us as the audience are seeing. We're seeing Linda and Bill's version of this woman that they picked up. It's a stretch. That's what I'm saying. You have to really bend over backwards to try to explain these things, and it's just not
to
there.
Be a stretch, because I like the way you're thinking. I think that we would need more clues along the way that they were that out of it.
Right. And you get it with Bill. Linda, not so much. She seems to have a better head on her shoulder. She's just kind of annoyed by Bill's kind of with the way he's been dealing with his grief.
I think he doesn't ever let her deal with her grief in her way. And
maybe that could be true.
That's the vibe that I got. But also, what your version also needs is that after that couple dies, Kat needs to look like Kat, because that point of view is gone.
Yes, that would be good. I would love that. That would have been a great decision.
Wouldn't
it? Although I do love Emma Roberts a bit more, and I kind of like that she finishes out the film.
She's so great.
The bottom line is you have to talk your way out of a lot of this stuff, and there's almost just too much of that to really like give the director credit for being really smart, because I don't think he thought of any of this necessarily. But it's his first movie. I'm gonna chalk it up to his directorial debut. Maybe that's it. That's all I have for that.
Thanks. That's great. Question for you. Do you think they got the ending right?
Absolutely. I think it's simple and effective. This is going to sound weird. It kind of reminded me of the ending of Requiem for a Dream. Have you seen that movie, or have you seen it in a while?
It's been a while.
It's an incredibly depressing ending where every character suddenly realizes all of the mistakes they've made. And it's very nihilistic, just like this, where you're just like, they're just left with all of their mistakes and their bleak future. And it kind of reminded me of that a little bit. I thought they nailed it. I think it's just a very simple but effective ending. How about you?
Yes, I love it when an ending can be this simple. And despite the huge problem that I have expressed with these so-called plot twists, I do think that the ending they have is the correct one. And I feel like the writers, when they are, we know who it is. When Oz sat down to write, like he had a clear vision of how it was going to end. I just get that feeling. That said, do you have any other ideas for alternate endings?
I certainly do. So mine, have you ever seen The Last House on the Left?
Yes.
The first Wes Craven movie. It's a pretty rough movie.
Yes.
It's been remade. The remake's actually really good, I gotta say. I'm not a big fan of remakes normally, but the remake's pretty good. So my alternate ending idea goes that route, a more revenge route.
Nice.
In which we add a title card for Bill as the last title card, and we learn that he immediately recognized Joan as being Catherine right away. And I don't know how he ended up at the bus station. Maybe he's obsessed with her, found out that she had broken out, and he kind of followed her. I don't know how they get there. But he immediately knows, but does not give up the fact that he knows that it's Kat. And he ropes her along the whole time, making her feel comfortable, showing that he's helping her. He's very, he's playing that father figure really well. And then he ends up drugging her. She wakes up tied up in the boiler room. Him and his wife feed her to the furnace where she belongs. So a nice revenge story. That's the way I wouldn't end it that way, but that would be my strange interpretation.
That is, I can kind of see, that's kind of like a Stephen King ending.
A little bit. And like you alluded to earlier, like where you're like, is Bill supposed to be kind of off-putting and creepy? I think you could kind of play into that because you go back and forth like, oh, no, he's not. He's just being fatherly. But then it turns out that he actually was. So that is mine. How about you? Do you have any alternate ideas?
I do. Now I'm kind of blown away by yours because mine is not really an alternate ending. Mine is an alternate movie. How about that?
Oh, cool.
And then I'll comment again on yours.
Sure.
So the ending is not necessarily better in mine because I think the ending's fine, but yes. I think it's a better movie. So, I mean, who am I? But it's a better Joan story that would accomplish the twist that the filmmakers wanted in a better, non-infuriating, non-cheating way.
Mm-hmm.
So what if somehow in the first boiler room scene, something happened with the boiler? And I need help with coming up with logistics here because I grew up in the South, as you know. I have no boiler experience at all, but I know there's fire involved. So
yes,
what if instead of getting shot by a cop, which was just a device by which Joan's true identity could later be definitively communicated to anyone in the audience who hadn't figured it out yet, instead of that, there's a fire, Kat's face gets horribly burned. Then Joan could have some subtle facial scars or something, nothing extreme. But that could later be interpreted as skin grafts having happened. And so Joan had to have plastic surgery, including the nose. I think with the right nose, she could look like Kiernan Shipka, aged 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great explanation as to why she no longer looks the same as Kat. And she would absolutely be able to fool Rose's parents. Maybe. Or imagine your ending combined with my story where Bill is smart and he does figure it out, even though she's trying to cover her tracks and she looks.
You know what you need? Sorry to interrupt, but you need a something like she wears a necklace, a very definitive necklace, and Bill notices that necklace. There needs to be something.
Or something of Rose's that she stole.
Yes, like a trophy of some sort, like an earring or something. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
Oh, yes. No. Now we're remaking the movie together. So that's cool. So I have another topic that's a little beyond the ending. And I know it's probably not true, but there's a dread it theory that Longlegs is a prequel to the Blackcoat's daughter.
Really? Now I really need to see this trailer.
I think we should consider putting a link to this in the show notes so that listeners can decide for themselves. But I won't go into why. But if that were to happen, I wouldn't be totally against it.
Cool. You said a prequel?
A prequel. So I think.
Okay.
I think so. We talked about this movie happening in the teens or the aughts. I think.
Yep.
I think Longlegs happens in the 90s.
Gotcha.
So yeah, there's some like discussion about how we never really see the monster, and Kat calls him Daddy, and Daddy Longlegs.
Oh, Longlegs.
I mean,
okay.
Maybe it's just Redditors being creative as they will do, but
hey, that's fun though.
It is fun. That's all I got there. If you don't mind, I'll go ahead and do the cursed fortune cookie moment.
Please do.
Let us pray. No, just kidding. So think of the cursed fortune cookie this way. And when I tell you to think about it, please know that I'm really telling myself to think about it. I'm trying to convince myself because this segment is still highly experimental, and I know that it will need some calibrating. So imagine, at what point in the movie did everything go so absolutely wrong? What if you could extend a life raft to one character at that point and make everything okay for them? Like, imagine that you could save Rose's life by convincing her parents not to send her to boarding school at all, which, I mean, that's a reach because parents under normal circumstances are not going to trust a fortune cookie to rule out a school for their daughter. Also, that decision happened way before the movie, so it's kind of like cheating. And there's enough cheating going on in this movie, so I think the fortune cookies should be for Rose's parents, but I think at this point we've already lost Rose. Kat's a lost cause. Kat's going to get possessed no matter what. I think a nice fortune cookie would warn Bill not to pick up a stranger. Linda already doesn't want to have anything to do with Joan. So imagine Bill's on his way to wherever he notices Joan at the bus stop. He gets a scrumptious fortune cookie, and it reads, "Fortune favors the vigilant traveler who steers clear of your daughter's murderer, whom you must open your eyes and recognize it's only been 9 years for the love of humanity." You would listen to that, right? I mean, that is pretty specific. But also remember, the cookie is supposed to be evil. It's a cursed fortune cookie. So this cookie goes out to Rose's dad, Bill, who's no longer with us, so he's not listening. But it says, "Embrace the unknown, for in the company of strangers, new paths to fortune may unfold." Thank you. Thank you.
That's awesome.
Thank you. The next thing that we do on the podcast Compels You is we do our ratings on the Scream scale. I think I went first last time, so it's only fair that Bill goes first this time. Bill, how did you rate the movie?
I'll be happy to. So I'll give my justification first. They did a great job of setting up the isolated setting. Again, the Parents' Day, the week-long break. Like we talked about earlier, I thought they did a great job of setting that up pretty organically. The score, I think, deserves like a lot of the acclaim here. I was trying to picture a lot of the scenes, what they'd be like if there was no score in it. They'd be kind of silly, realistically.
That's true for a lot of movies, though.
True. Or if they just put like a different score in. I'm just trying, like this one I feel like really carries the movie on its shoulders. So hats off to Elvis Perkins for the incredible score. Overall, I liked the acting. However, I wanted more Emma Roberts. I think she only filmed like a week on this movie, I think I read. So I don't know if she was doing other projects or something. You know, the other actresses are fantastic, but you can tell Emma Roberts is just clearly on another level, like just in the scenes that she has. So wish I would have gotten more of her. That's just me being selfish. Not sure how you would have put that in the movie, but anyway. I gotta say, the horror scenes in the third act of the movie looked kind of silly. I can't describe why. There's just something about like when she was stabbing people, like the sisters and Rose. It looked silly to me. And again, maybe it's just the way that it was directed. It just looked silly. And then like we already talked about, the scene where Kat's approached by the police officer in the furnace room, like the big peak of the movie, again, kind of came off as a little bit silly with the whole Hail Satan thing, very cliche. I really liked the storytelling device, again, the different title cards and kind of showing it from different perspectives. However, I think that kind of falls apart a little bit towards the end. There's a little bit too much back and forth between those, especially for a first watch. I would say people that watch this once are going to come away with this movie having an unfavorable view of it, even just for that reason. It just gets very muddled. And I attribute that, again, it's a first-time director. He's like just comes out guns a-blazing, trying to throw everything he can, all of his artistic ideas in without practicing a lot of restraint. Totally get that. Again, the visual representation of the demon just didn't look all that menacing to me. It's not a deal breaker by any means, but that got me a little bit. And the film really asks you to suspend disbelief a lot. And that's, again, what we've already talked about. That kind of gets a little bit tiresome throughout the movie. But I guess I'm kind of only outlining bad things. But I really did enjoy this movie. It's hard to not compare it to like last week's movie, where last week's movie was very much a slow burn, a very subtle movie, did not need a lot of tricks. This one is very much like a popcorny movie that needed to throw a lot. It took a lot of big swings, and I think some of them just kind of missed. So on first watch, I would have given this film 3 screams. However, it definitely improved on my second watch because I was able to focus on some of the more nuanced aspects that I thought they did very well, rather than trying to stitch the timeline together in my head like I did the first time. So on my second watch, I ended up giving it 3.5 screams, and that is my final rating.
Wow.
What is your rating, Stacy?
I agreed with you about so many things, and I just want to say I didn't even think about this. How you were saying some of the violent scenes were silly. I tend to think that those scenes are always silly. Like, I'm the one that laughs at the wrong time in the theater.
Sure.
And I'm sure people think I'm a psychopath, which I'm not. I have other issues, but we won't go there. So I just always thought that was me, but maybe there's something to that, because I probably don't see the movies that you see where the violence looks more realistic.
Right.
Something that we're going to explore in this podcast over time.
Yes, definitely.
I actually thought not the violence itself, but like the use of gore was very judicious and intentional. Like they didn't necessarily show like a lot of gore at first you don't even see anything of the sisters when they've been murdered. Later you see a little bit, but what you do see are 2 long red tracks in the snow where you can perfectly imagine her carrying their severed heads. And that was very effective.
Good point. Yes.
Very chilling to me. So it's weird because I'm not a gore person, but I do like the way that they sparingly used it and then got, some really good effect out of it. Like at the end when Emma Roberts, Joan Cat, murders the couple and she's been stabbing them and she gets splashed in the face with blood. And then it's like this very human moment where she has blood dripping down her face and it's like getting in her mouth and then she throws up. Like, that's totally what would happen. It's very appropriate.
Yes.
And it was also, very viscerally disturbing for me, who doesn't watch a lot of gore, which is good. That's a good effect, right?
Yes.
So I was really torn because I'm really angry about that one issue.
Yes.
I was between a 2.5 and a 3 because of that issue, and I really feel a 2.5 is too low considering the quality of the acting, most of the writing, the cinematography, so many good things to like and enjoy about the movie. And I like to think of a movie as an experience. It's a journey. It's not a destination. Like, it doesn't have to add up to a 10 like a gymnastics routine. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's something that lives in time, like music. You can enjoy some things and not others, and it's okay. At the same time, sorry, not sorry, it just can't be higher than a 3 to me because of the terrible stunt the filmmakers pulled with that air quotes plot twists. And if I'm being honest, that ruins the movie for me in a sense. Not in all ways, but in at least one way. So I'm really torn. But at the end of the day, I do want to be fair and give credit where credit is due. I just can't with that plot twist. So I think I'm gonna have to go with 3. Otherwise,
All right.
it wouldn't be fair to all the other movies that did get their twists right. You know what I'm saying? People that really did do their homework.
True.
Any comments on that?
I can't blame you. I think I fall victim. And this is going to happen throughout this podcast where I think I'm going to be rating movies based on former movies, and it gets tricky. You know, I was even talking to my wife about this. Like, she's like, "Oh, do you have specific criteria?" And I'm like, "Not necessarily, because you have to view a film on its own. What do you say? Like on its own merits, or like what its intention was."
Yes.
So like The Lodge has a very different intention or a different tone than something like this. So to try to rate this based on how I rated The Lodge would be kind of unfair. This is a little bit more kind of like of a popcorny movie, whereas The Lodge is a very subtle movie. So I think what you said, it's almost more about like deducting points, again, for like failed, for plot holes, for stuff like that you should be able to get right no matter what type of movie you're making. So
Yeah.
I think a 3 is fair. I would not be far off from that on if I were to watch it a third time, perhaps it would drop to a 3. So I think we're pretty in line there. So a 3 and a 3.5, which gets us 3.25 as an average rating for this movie.
All right. That seems fair.
I agree.
And I purposely didn't read any reviews or look at any scores yet. I haven't done that yet. I will after this.
I did, and I think we rated it slightly higher. If I'm looking at IMDb, I think there's right around a 6, like a 5.9. So we might just be a smidge higher than average.
You know what?
But yeah, that's fair.
That's how it works because we're horror people, and we all know that
Yes.
people who don't like horror go and tank the ratings of every horror movie.
Yes.
Except for really special standout ones for some reason that get like 100%. But
yes, those rare gems.
isn't that weird when that happens?
So weird.
So we've ranked the movie. I think it's time. Last time we talked about what our coming up cursed category was going to be. Let's pause to reflect a bit on our viewings and discussions of both The Lodge and The Blackcoat's Daughter, if you don't mind.
Sure.
We've explored in both movies themes of isolation, culpability, failed redemption, weird religion, with both films serving as haunting explorations of the human psyche and the darkness that resides within each of us. A darkness that too many of us come to know intimately in this, our postmodern state of perpetual alienation. And we did this exploration in arguably one of the best ways, with Hollywood nepotism and a fuck ton of snow. So next time, prepare to embark on another cinematic journey with us as we watch and discuss 2 titles that comply with our new cursed category, which is movies that take place at least in part at sea and have to do with cults. After extensive research and debate, we have settled on 2 movies for this cursed category, and those are The Wicker Man, 1973, and one of its contemporary reimaginings, Apostle, 2018. Once again, we will find ourselves traversing some similar thematic terrain as these films delve into the complexities of weird belief systems and that special sense of eerie isolation one experiences amidst communities bound by, let's say, unconventional rituals and practices. So as we sail on through the murky waters of cinematic intrigue, fear not. Or, I mean, fear, yes, do fear. For we shall set sail for our next dark and mysterious destination, setting the silver screen figuratively ablaze like an effigy, with tales of culty terror and sacrifice. Let not the flames of your curiosity be extinguished, as we will tackle all your burning questions. Or our burning questions, really. We don't have the mechanism in place to address your questions. In fact, As of the time of this recording, we don't have any listeners at all, which means you don't exist. QED, your questions are moot. But please don't take that personally. Please do like and subscribe, leave us a review, and recommend this episode to a friend if you are lucky enough to have any friends that are awesome enough to appreciate this very particular brand of highly evolved artistic expression and cultural commentary. And do please join us next time for The Wicker Man. It's gonna be fire!